you tell us your name, age, and who you are?
Sure. My name is Jean-Claude Favreau. I'm 74. And who I am? What do you mean by that?
Oh, what's your profession?
Well, I'm retired.
Oh, what did you use?
I was in advertising of all things. After a year in veterinary school, I gave that up because it was not at all what I expected. So I kind of leaped backwards into advertising. So, in fact, my first job for working for an agency per se, I'm going to have eye contact with you, was working in an office for ad agency above Levy's.
Oh, really?
So we knew where to go for lunch. And I worked with a guy named Richard Lewis. And he was, do you know him? He's sort of on the B list of comedians. So, okay, so we worked together for about a year, and then he went off to Hollywood to, he did a lot of stand-up and then wrote things and was in some movies and stuff, so that was, okay, keep them coming.
You grew up in Heights, right?
Yes, I did. Okay, I'll tell you the first thing I remember the day setting foot in Hasbrook Heights. This was in 1947.
Wow.
Shortly after Abraham Lincoln's tenure in junior high school. I can't remember the day after or the day before, but it was momentous enough that it sticks in my memory to this day. I was born in Toronto, Canada, of French parents who came from Paris and a nearby suburb. And they moved to Toronto in 1936, and I was born in 1943. And then to start his own business, decided to immigrate to the United States, and found a house in Hasbrook Heights. So again, my father had done all the heavy lifting, had purchased the home, done all that responsible stuff that men used to be exclusive to back then, and my mother was in charge of me. So we had taken a train from Toronto, which was pretty cool, because we were in a roomette, had a bed and stuff, so it was a little exclusive thing, and for me it was cool. I was 4 and a half. So we arrived in New York, either Penn Station or Grand Central Station, but it was just huge and echoing, and wow, it was really, really something. So we took a bus, and again, this is a 70-year-old memory. So the bus stopped on Burton Avenue. My mother knew that the house was on Burton Avenue. So I believe it was coming up Williams Avenue, and stopped at Burton and Williams. And we got off and started walking. And my mother wasn't aware of it at the time, but instead of turning right, she turned left. So we were going the wrong way, away from Route 46. So I was dutifully holding my mom's hand, and we were going along. And I remember, and we arrived at dusk. So as we're walking, it's getting darker and darker. And I'm thinking, my mother knew the address and all, but people didn't have lights on in those days. There were no lights. No, but I mean, it wasn't lit up like that. Yeah. And so we walked for a while, and to me it was like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes, so we were walking. And my mother was, I guess, conveying to me that we were she didn't know where we were, and a police car happened to go by, so she flagged him down. And the officer was gracious enough to invite us into his car, and took us right to the front door. And I remember everything dark in the front door opening up, and white light from inside. It was like a new life. I still see that imagery of this was a start. So what was it like? That little strip, what I'm talking about is Burton Avenue runs the length of Heights, but Burton Avenue, where we lived on, was 1 block. So north of Route 46, ending on Pasadena Avenue, which is a whole other story. There were no curbs. It was asphalt road, and on the side was just packed dirt, and then a berm, a grassy berm, and then the sidewalk. So they hadn't installed curbs as yet. And across the street was woods. Hasbrook Heights was full of woods. Every block had a undeveloped piece of land that was woods. And so as kids, there were 4 of us in proximity on the other side, sort of, and this geographic boundary of Route 46, which we used to play on the median divider and count cars that went by, the occasional car that went by in the forest. So the 4 of us, like, we'd spend, no video games, we played, and we climbed trees, and we built tree forts. And every neighborhood had, like I said, a forested region, and then they would build a tree house, a fort, as it were, a boy thing. And if we were lucky enough, if it was close enough, or you had a father who had access, or sometimes we'd go to building sites where there were houses that were springing out like mushrooms, and you'd be lucky enough to find planks or wood or something, and so you'd make do with scrap and stuff and build. Some were extensive and some were just, slats of wood, some place where you could, hang out.
Would you say that was pretty much your entire childhood summed up, or
Climbing trees? Again, we were occupied differently than today. We were outside most of the time. I can count on the fingers of one hand the times I went into other kids' homes, really. It wasn't sort of done, you sort of hung out. And, again, on the other side of Route 46, over here there was Dietmann's and Fisher's. You've probably heard of those, right?
Yeah.
Well, ours was, I believe it was called Boulevard Luncheonette, but we called it Palmieri's. And I never really found out if it was Paul and Mary's or some guy named Palmieri had opened a thing. So that was our sort of sweet shop. Candy bars were a nickel. Only one candy bar was a dime, and that was Van Houten chocolates, which was this exquisite, I think, Swiss chocolate that was, melt in your mouth kind of chocolate. Otherwise, nickel. Sodas were a nickel. Hot dogs were 20 cents. Slice of pizza was 15 cents. It wasn't until later that, and I sound like when I was a kid, the old grizzled guys would go, "Why, in my day, I could take the bus to Chicago for 18 cents." So now I'm saying things that are crazy, that the price of things. And so my childhood was quite a happy one. Better ask me some other questions.
What was your experience at school?
Okay. When I arrived at 4½, although I came from Canada, Toronto, in Ontario, was exclusively an English province. Quebec was the French Canadians, who are different than French. They speak sort of a different patois, different. So I spoke French exclusively at home with my parents. I know I had some little friends in Toronto that I recall, so I must have communicated with them. But really, I thought in French, and everything was so. But by the time, because I shortly after we moved in, my mother spied another family moving in on Pasadena Avenue, and she suggested I go over there for a little while. And so I met my childhood friend, and we were both forbidden to, he came from Jersey City, and we, although Toronto was a city, we were out of the city, but within city limits, but in a residential neighborhood. So the big thing was not to cross streets as a little kid. So, and my mother had told me about the invisible car, because it's never a car that you can see that hits you. I mean, that's obvious, right? You wouldn't allow a car. So she had said, you look one way, you look the other, and then you look back, and you look for that invisible car that's going to get you. So whenever I crossed the street, I would look for the invisible car that was going to run me down. And so it was a way of, it was a smart way to, so the first time I went, we yelled at each other across this Pasadena Avenue, and I was frustrated that I couldn't go over there, so I'd ask my mother, and I think she might have gone down there the first time and say, okay, go ahead. There hasn't been a car going past in 15 minutes. So by the time I entered kindergarten, I guess I was 6, in normal time, I was just as proficient in English as any 6-year-old would be, and I kind of picked it up by osmosis. As I understand, there's a neurological facility in little brains that for language, and it's specifically a genetic thing that you learn the language. And by the time you're 8 or 9, that diminishes capacity to learn a language. So the earlier you learn a language, in fact, I've noticed personally that after 8 or 9, you retain an accent of your original language. Mais quand je parle français, je n'ai pas d'accent américain. So when I speak French, I have no English or American accent, and vice versa. So I was looking at that. Better ask me.
Middle school, high school, what was that like?
Oh, well, I went to Lincoln School because there were the 2, Euclid and Lincoln.
Hey, Lincoln.
Euclid.
And I won't bother to do it, but I can still remember my teachers. They were all ladies. And they were dedicated women to, in retrospect, they were a pain in those days. And they commanded and demanded respect. And you wouldn't think of talking back. I mean, it wasn't the rigid thing that my parents had in France, but it was expected of you. When the teacher said, keep quiet, and I was sort of the class caught up in some way. A little story. In 2nd grade, Miss Rue, who was very pretty, and I guess in 2nd grade I still saw it. And so there were times when I was disruptive, and so she would take me outside in the hallway so as not to upbraid me in front of the classmates, which was cool, and talk to me. And she had on thick red lipstick, and so I would look up to her, and she would tell me what I was doing wrong, and I was fascinated. And her lips her lips in the corner would kind of stick together, and there were times when she would open her mouth and it would unstick, and to me I was and I wasn't hearing a word she was saying, but I was just fascinated by that. Again, you have these memories that stick in your mind. After Lincoln School, there was 7th, 8th grade were in Franklin School, which is now
Franklin Gym and the old nursing home, yeah.
Walking to school, by golly. But you would, in Snowden, you would wait for there was a horn, a klaxon, that would call the fire department. And there was a code, and every family, we had the code. Or it was a volunteer fire department, I guess it still is. So they would blast this code that would explain what block in Hasbrook Heights had a fire, an emergency, or whatever. And our code was 5. And so if it was snowing out, you would wait, and you would hear that, and you would count. And say, oh, and pray for it. Yeah, it's 5. No school today. Otherwise, you would walk. So when I walked to Franklin School, I was walking a little over a mile. Hasbrook Heights, unlike other schools in the surrounding area, had no lunch program at that. So very few of us were bagging it. It was mostly you go home for lunch. So that's what we do. And pretty soon I got a bike. And so you do it on a bike. And back and forth. It was kind of an uphill thing going and then coming back. If you're not familiar with the terrain, coasting. And we were the second graduating class out of the new high school. Class of 61. Okay.
Anything you remember specifically about high school? Like, how was your senior and junior year? Did you find it frustrating?
Well, I was sweating going to high school. Oh my God, you know, I'm going to go to high school. And we had a housekeeper, you know, typical middle class. My parents were in business for themselves. And it was a place in, has to do with decorative display in South Hackensack. So, what do they call that? I was kind of a latchkey kid, is that what they call it, latchkey? Latchkey? No. Okay, well, the housekeeper to tend me for lunch, or my mother would most of the time be able to come home for lunch because South Hackensack. So you'd go home for lunch and you'd come back. Come again?
How was your junior and senior year? Like, did you stress about college or any
Oh,
job?
so she told me, the housekeeper said, don't worry, it'll go like this. And that was, what was that, 65? It went fast, it went fast. There was very little hazing. I was not part of a group. I was kind of being the only child, I read a lot, so I was kind of a nerd. Geek, I guess, is the new expression. So, but because of my size, they didn't sort of pick on me. So there wasn't much, there was that freshman thing. But then once you were there, and then there was sophomore, and then by the time we were in the junior. What are you guys, by the way?
We're seniors.
Seniors. So when you're seniors, you're cruising.
Yeah.
You know the thing. You know what's going on. I admittedly didn't apply myself. So I mean, I have report cards that it's a shame that Jean-Claude is such a brilliant student, and yet, if only he applied himself. So when I graduated, there was a guy that had come around. I think I still remember Pop Warner. He was a guy from Dakota Wesleyan University, Methodist University in South Dakota. And he talked the talk and told huge stories about, a wonderful place. So I applied there and got accepted. So, I'm going to go to college. And now that you're going to university, my father, you're going to have to. And so I really applied. And the first semester I was on the dean's list. I was like, wow, because I had paid attention because I was sweating it. Keep them coming.
College? What was college like? Did you find it different from not being in Hasbrook Heights anymore?
Well, the graduating class, our graduating class in 61, geez, I 105 or something like that, or I don't remember, the exact number. But when I went to this Wesleyan University, and I was a biology major, and I had small classes like comparative anatomy. I was 7 in my class. And then I went further to when I was actually in veterinary school in Kansas State. The guy was using, it was 150 in a class in an auditorium. The guy was using a loudspeaker and stuff. Wow. But there it was nice, and it was also going back in time to sort of what Hasbrook Heights used to be. In that out there it was a nickel for a cup of coffee, and you're from New York, and it was that sort of thing, and people were South Dakota, you know, there's a town here, and then 70 miles away is the next town, closest town. You go shopping to Sioux Falls, you know, which is 70 miles away. And so people gave each other eye contact and stuff, and you conversed. And if you met someone, you stopped, paused, and said, just what a nice day it is. So it was a community feeling that was sort of prevalent in those early days when I was in Hasbrook Heights, which was kind of nice to repeat that.
Would you say that would be like today or no? Like how did that experience in Hasbrook Heights change? Like just being able to talk to anyone?
Well, today it's a different time. It's unfortunate, but I've sort of never encouraged it myself in my little. Oh, and so now, almost full circle, I'm back in the same little house. My mother passed away in 2004, so my wife and I moved into that little house, and so I'm back there now.
What made you come back to Heights after college? Like, why here?
My roots. My parents were here. I mean, I'm close to my parents. Gosh, after college, I was married and a father in a very short space of time. And my daughter was born in Paris. I was living in Paris at the time. And so I kind of lived all over. Again, I lived out in Kansas for a while. I always kind of went back here. Lived in Bergenfield, lived in Fairlawn, lived in Saddlebrook. Kind of nearby, again, close to my parents. And then the house became available, so just came back here. Keep them coming.
You talked about shopping while you were in the university. How is shopping in Hasbrook Heights? Like, what shops did you go to, and like, what did you usually do?
Oh, nothing much. I mean, didn't do much. What happened was Hackensack was a hub for shopping, and then came the malls, which killed really the small town mom and pop store, which was too bad. When I lived in France, this was in 1965. I lived there for a year and some months, and America was like, people would ask me, what was it like? And you mean you can go to one place and shop and get bread and meat and fish and all the comestibles in one spot, whereas in France, you would go to the boulangerie, bakery for bread, you would go to the butcher, you would go to the baker, you would go to the patisserie, all in one roof. And now, people, don't like the big thing, and you don't get good fruit in places unless you pay for it, and now people are going to smaller places where you have better qualities, usually, and some big places like Whole Foods, they try to do that, but they can only do that by charging a lot, and they're not doing well. So shopping, it wasn't a big thing. I mean, again, proximity to Route 17. We did not have traffic back then.
That must have been good.
Yeah.
What's good about Hasbrook Heights is that, you're a short distance from anywhere. And, of course, in the big city. Do that.
You talked about going into a biology major. Anything in high school that influenced that? Like teachers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was one teacher, Miss Hennings, who was the English teacher as a senior. And Miss Hennings, wow, was she tough. Oh my goodness, so that at the end of the junior year, I get my thing and, oh my God, I'm going to be in Hennings' class. Lord. And little did I realize that what a great influence she was. She was tough. If you didn't put at the top of on the left-hand side, or I forget, but it was explicit. Your name, last name first, first name last, the date, the time, the course, and what it relates to. And if you didn't do it to the letter, you got an N/C. No credit. What did I do? You figure it out. Wow. So stuff like that, but you learn discipline and stuff, and got me into English, creative writing. A wonderful person. And near the end of the school year, I had to go away, had cancer, died. And a terrible loss, but great influence, great influence. I had aspirations of being a veterinarian, and all my altruistic ambitions, and there were no dogs and cats in Kansas. It was product management, and it was brutal. And I still have haunted by images and dreams and stuff. I didn't like it at all, so I quit. And got work in a laboratory just because I opted out for a Bachelor of Science in biology, because I had all those biology credits. I ended up working in a quality control. Oh, you're the guy, the graduate from, oh yeah, go up on that tanker car and get me a sample of some chemical, so I'm climbing up. And I found out I could do, again, Père de famille, I had another child, and so I wanted to make some money, so I was, the guys in the break room were cool, and they worked in a warehouse, so I opted to quit the lab and go to work in a warehouse and drive a forklift truck. So I did some of those jobs for a number of years, and then I was unhappy, and it showed, and I applied myself and applied for a job with Prentice Hall, writing things, and you needed, they gave you a sample book and write something about it. Well, I wrote 3 different angles on a brochure, and really kind of like that, so that launched my advertising career. And then I went to Lovey's, and then other advertising agencies. I worked in New York City, Cunningham Walsh, and I was a madman for a while. You know the program? Mad Men?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, you'll tell me. And, with the 3 cocktail lunch and stuff. And then I went into my own, doing freelance copy and stuff like that, and got through. And then I started, I would occasionally do photography and writing, and so I decided to go out and business my own, and I did, for a couple of years, multi-projector slideshows. That is so,
Oh man.
so back. So you had a multi-projectors, 2, 3, 4, 5, and slides would change, and it was a program that would run with light, sound, and it was a slide, so it was a 35mm image, so you could project it on a movie screen. It was huge. But then video came along. I was out of business. You could take a little tape deck along with you and plug it into a TV. So that was that. And just kind of worked freelance in various places that advertising agencies, and decided to kind of retire, more or less.
You said that you loved writing in high school. Do you think as life goes on, you kind of find yourself doing what you loved in high school? Because now you're in advertising. Well, you were in advertising.
You hope to. Well, in a way, advertising. I prostituted myself for over 20 years, giving them what they wanted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was creative, and it was the creative aspect of advertising that I really enjoyed. Doing radio commercials, the occasional TV commercial, doing voiceovers myself. So the creative part of it was nice. And I've published a few stories here and there, personal accounts, things like that.
Did you hold any positions in the town?
No.
Did you participate in any activities, organizations?
No.
uh, looking back at the high school, is there anything that you like see changed a lot, or is it pretty consistent?
Well, my two kids went through the high school system. My daughter graduated in '82. So I would occasionally go there and pick her up. And in my day, and I sort of saw it in my daughter's class, in my son's class. I went through class of '61, so I'm a child really of the '50s. And there were the rockers, and there were the chino pants kids, and then there were the jocks, the athletic kind of guy. So there were sort of three groups. And I sort of saw the same thing in my daughter's era. How about you guys? Is it sort of like that?
I would say it's a lot
There's
more
a collegiate
Yeah.
person.
but like it's like more like people are in two kind of groups now. Like I would say like if it's one person, they usually be associated with two groups. So like maybe like a little bit of jock, but like a little bit of smart people too.
So like everyone's kind of like
Not that
Diverse.
jocks
Yeah.
aren't smart.
no, but it's like there's people who are sports oriented. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But in our school now, I think people are just more friends with like people's personalities instead of like
Yeah.
what they do. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't know. 'Cause we need to
Yeah, it's a really diverse.
Now, luminaries, there was a kid who was in American Pie.
Oh,
Can I say that?
What's his name? Yeah.
Yeah, what's his name?
Jason
something.
Big.
So in my day, it was Arthur Godfrey. Does that name ring a bell at all? He was a radio personality and stuff. And then before him was Frank Sinatra. Okay, here's a little tangent. Frank Sinatra, who you've heard of. Well, Frank Sinatra didn't pick this town out of thin air, and it was sort of because of his mob ties. And there was a mob influence
In Height?
in
Yeah,
Hasbrook
Italian.
Heights.
Italian.
I didn't know this.
Oh. And they got him the house in their neighborhood. And he stayed a couple of years and then moved to Hollywood, where he was. And there was quite a notorious mobster by the name of Willie Moretti. Giancarlo, I think, but Willie. And he was a contributor to the town, the church. Again, a good impression of the family man and all that. And you've seen The Godfather, and you've seen oh my gosh, the program, the famous HBO program. Help me.
Wait.
I'm not much of a TV person.
It's the family name, right?
Yeah.
The Sopranos.
Sopranos. Thank you so much. So, and here's a childhood memory. I wasn't aware of it at all. And a lot of people were not aware of it either. But what I remember was that Willie, again, lived in the town for a number of years and had contracted a social disease, that his brain was deteriorating. And so he was only in his early 50s and was sort of getting kind of senile, running his mouth is what they said. So he was knocked off by his own club, as we know, his own group, because they were thought that there was a committee meetings and all that, and they were afraid he was going to blab. And so they knocked him off. And what I remember was one of my classmates had said, "Hey, do you want to go to the funeral for Willie Moretti?" And I said, "Who?" Yeah, so I was 8 years old, I guess. 8 years old, 51, yeah. 8 years old, so it was kind of a trek, 8 years old, to go to Corpus Christi, and on the boulevard were flower cars that I had never really seen. You know what flower cars, right? They're cars, convertibles, and the funeral directors have them, with the back open and filled with flowers. And I'm talking over 20 flower cars, double parked on the boulevard. And to me as an 8-year-old, it was wow. And you'd walk, and it would take you 5 minutes to walk the length of those cars. And a mob of a couple of thousand people. I mean, the boulevard was closed. There were people who couldn't get in the church. So he was quite the famous, or infamous in this case, guy. And I think he's buried in South Vegas. But that was impressive. Again, I can't remember the next day or the day before that, but that day was something to see.
Anything about the boulevard that you missed that has changed?
There was what they call cruising the Vard. I think it was cruising the boulevard, cruising the Vard. So at lunchtime, those that were fortunate enough to have cars would just go back and forth around the circle. Is the circle?
Yeah.
Circle. I once had the nefarious accomplishment of going around the circle 52 times on some dark night. I think since then that record has been eclipsed, I'm sure. But anyway, you'd go around the circle back, and then go down, turn around and come back, and just cruise the boulevard, and just say hi to other people cruising the boulevard, and then go back to school. That was a lunchtime thing. And you'd probably eat lunch in the car. Again, I didn't really hang out in the boulevard as much as other people. So.
That's it?
I have, I'm going to touch on another subject too. So, for years, before I moved to Hasbrook Heights, and for years after, Hasbrook Heights was exclusively a white town. And when I say white, I mean to the exclusion of people of color. And that was due to the tacit agreement among realtors not to allow, to dissuade people of color from buying homes in Hasbrook Heights. And as far as I know personally, because I've heard from my daughter, who the first time that she knew of a black girl attending high school was in 1982. That was only 35 years ago. So since then it's changed now. There's people's attitudes have changed. There's a diversity, but racism is still a problem. And I belonged to a group for a short time, Facebook group, a closed group. I grew up in Hasbrook Heights, was the name of it. Ring a bell? So, and then Chicken Delight and all that. And so I told them a few stories. There was a plane crash over our house. This is a plane crash that you probably haven't heard of. It was 1966. Single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza, small plane. Had some trouble and lost altitude and came between where our little house is. There's two houses on either side, two-story. He fit right in there and was crashing, and as he came in, there was a tree in the front of the house. This wing knocked our TV aerial over that was hanging off of the chimney and hit the tree with this wing, spun him around, and he backed in and across the street where the woods used to be, were our houses, and there was a slope. And they had dug out driveway so that you could drive the car into the house. And it landed just with the wing and the broken wing over the space and the fuselage hanging in the open space of the driveway without touching the house across the street. If the tree hadn't been there, he would have plowed right through the house. They were away on vacation. And my daughter was in her playpen. And I wasn't home. I had gone to go get snacks. I was gone 5 minutes, and when I came back, it was pandemonium. You know, the first responders had, taped the place and couldn't get near it. And I had to abandon my car and run up. And my daughter was in her playpen in the driveway, and the plane had come right over. So when the reporters got there, they moved the playpen a little closer, and they took a shot, a dramatic shot. And she made the papers, the front page of the center section, miraculous miss. And there was my daughter in the balloon around, a year and a half old, and the plane had come. So back to exclusion. It's not many people are aware of it. Oh, the closed group. So I broached the subject, and I wrote a thing, basically what I told you, that things have changed. Well, in 18 hours, I got 61 responses, 61 comments. 3 of them were negative, denying it, and 58 were comments by personal experiences, people who had experienced discrimination, whether they gotten into town or not, and touching, amazing. And then people that commented started to, and one denier and another got into it, verbally on the comment lines, and it started to go. And the guy who had created the group said, "Oh, there's too much drama," and kicked her off, kicked me out, and erased 58 stories, history. Like that. It's a shame because I never thought of doing what do they call a screen grab or
Screenshot, yeah.
because these were actual stories and touching things, personal experiences that were undeniable. Again, diversity, and things have changed, and yet that's a part of history of Hasbrook Heights that's still, and that's why I'm here, sort of to relate stuff. On a lighter note, again, I enjoy the small community. I enjoy this library a lot. There used to be a library here. There was a house. It was on the top of Division Avenue at Burton. And the upstairs was devoted to children, and the downstairs was for adults. And I remember going up those steps into the magic world. And I always enjoyed books, and I still love literature. That's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Okay.
Well, I can't say that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It was
My
very
pleasure.
interesting.
My pleasure.
Really.